Shvach Shvatov. We are at the top of Nun Zayin Amud Aleph. Here we go, 57A1. Tan Rabbanan. We are the first column, second set of paragraphs. Tan Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Ben Bohayan Nasan Peal Yarak. The son of a man by the name of Bohayan gave payah from vegetables. As we spoke about, that cannot be done because maestros have to be taken, and therefore you're giving to the poor something which is not you can't eat. Okay, so the father Bohayan comes and he sees that these poor people are walking away with all these vegetables. They're standing at the gate of the garden. They're bound to leave. He says, "Stop, my children." He calls them my children. The Meiri says, when we speak to the poor, especially they're in your house and they're receiving from you, they feel small. You have to lift them up. You have to speak precious. You have to speak to them as as they are, with in a term of endearment. So he says, "My children, leave the vegetables behind, and I'm going to give you double the amount in tithe produce." He says, "I don't begrudge you for taking this produce, not at all." It's because the sages said that we cannot get payah from the vegetables. Why is it necessary for behind to say that I'm doing this not because I begrudge you? Why is he doing that? So that the poor people don't think themselves he's merely pushing us off, and he doesn't actually really mean it, and he's not actually going to take care of us. So he has to explain to himself, no, I'm not doing this to take from you. I'm not mad at you. I just simply don't want you to take this because our sages say you're not allowed to give payah from vegetables. Okay, Tanar Banan. So we talk about now another minhag, because that's been the topic of this entire chapter. Originally, the Kohanim placed the hides of their day's offering in the parva chamber. Okay, what is the parva chamber? It is a chamber in the Makom Mikdash, in the Har HaBayis. It's called parva either because the person who built it is called parva, or, fascinating alternative approach, and that is that there was an individual who wanted to see the Kohen Gadol do his avoda on Yom Kippur, and no one could see it, and he was very curious. So what did he do? There was these tunnels being dug in Crown Heights. So this individual dug tunnels. He wanted to go underground. There are no tunnels, real tunnels being dug in Crown Heights. But anyway, the point is that this person wanted to see what was going on in the base of Mikdash. So he dug tunnels under the base of Mikdash so he could, and made little holes so he could watch the Kohen Gadol do the avoda on Yom Kippur. But the people were not very happy with him, and they killed him. The place they killed him, they called after him base parva. Okay, the parva chamber. Go figure. Okay, le'erev. In the evening, they would divide. So basically, throughout the day, different kohanim, you're standing there in the base of Mikdash, you come with your chatas, and you see Mr. Cohen over here. Mr. Cohen, you take my carbon. Great, you give it to him, so he gets to keep the oros. However, he doesn't take. He takes the oros, he takes the hides, and he puts them in the base of parva. Next Cohen, and everyone's putting their hides over there. Some kohanim are doing a lot of karbanos, some doing a few karbanos. It's kind of like tips in a restaurant. Some places everyone gets their own tips, and some places they divide the tips. So over here, they're supposed to divide the tips according to those who worked that day. However, the strong-handed Kohanim would take by force more than their share of hides. They would not divide it equally. Say, no, I deserve more, and they would take more. So what they would do is they said, okay, I have a better idea. We're going to go from Friday to Friday. On Fridays, the entire mishmar. Okay, so basically the way it worked is they divided the Kohanim into groups called mishmaros, and within each mishmar you had a base av. You had an individual family worked on Sunday, another base av worked on Monday, another Tuesday, but together they would make up a mishmar. So on Friday, the whole mishmar gets together, so they divided then. That would be a good time because, presumably in that type of setting, you're not going to have one shnuk who's going to go ahead and take from everyone else. However, the high-ranking Kohanim would take more than the share by force. So the owners went ahead and consecrated the hides to heaven. In other words, they consecrated the hides to make them belong to the base of Mikdash, and therefore the Kohanim would not fight over them, and there would be no problems. Okay, Amru, the Gemara Bryce continues, and people said, it wasn't just a short time passed, they covered the entire sanctuary with gold plates. Okay, so the walls of the base of Mikdash, with the hides that were now belonged to the base of Mikdash, they would sell the hides. The proceeds would go to Bedek HaBayis, they go to help, buy things for the base of English. And what they did is they bought gold plates. Shein amal amma be'ove dinar zahav. They were 1 amma long by 1 amma wide, the thickness of a gold dinar. And so they would attach them to the walls of the base of English. Now the base of English is now covered in gold, glittering gold, beautiful from these hides. However, on the festivals, they would peel off the plates. They wouldn't leave them there throughout the entire year. They're actually not allowed to attach them because the base of English has very particular dimensions and way that it's made. There's an addition. So by not attaching it fully, they didn't violate any laws because they didn't attach it fully. And so 3 times a year for the regalim, they would peel it off the walls. And place them on a stairway on the temple mount. Okay, some discussion where the temple mount was, where the stairway was, but the bottom line is so that the people coming, the pilgrims, the people coming on the holidays would see that the incredible workmanship that was done for the base of Mikdash. Okay, so now we are going to continue with some of these themes that we talked about in the Mishnah and in the Gemara just now. Tana, it was Tana Bryce. brisa. Abishal Omer Korah Shel Shikma Hayu Vericho. There were sycamore trees trunks in Yericho. Remember that's what we're talking about in the Mishnah. And here we're going to have the backstory in terms of why they were belonging to Hagdish. They were robbers who would take them by force. They would go and steal from these sycamore trees. So the owners realized they have no way to stop them. So what they did is that they consecrated the trees to heaven. So to the base of Mikdash, and they put signs up, these are consecrated trees. And it worked. Okay, bottom line is like a little ironic, right? Hashem says don't steal. Hashem says don't steal from the base of Mikdash, but some people, like, certain things are very important to them. So they didn't steal. They didn't want to steal from people. They didn't care stealing. Once they knew it belonged to Hekdesh, no one touched it. Concerning these people, these strong-handed people who are stealers and others like them, we have the following statement. Amar Abba Shaul ben Batnis Bishum Abba Yosef ben Chanan, Ayulim Beis Baisis. Woe unto me because of the house of Baisis. We're going to see all these people, these houses are Kohen Gadol's, okay? So the house of Baisis, Olimi al-Asan, woe unto me because they're maces. These were the weapons that the house of Baisis used to use. We'll talk about what they used in a moment. Olim Beis Chanan, woe unto me because the house of Chanan, Olimi Chishasan, woe unto me because their whisperings, they would like speak negatively about other people. Olim Beis Kasros, woe unto me because the house of Kasros, Olimi Kolomasan, woe unto me because their pens. Olim Beis Yishmael ben Piachi, woe unto me because the house of Yishmael ben Piachi. Olimi Grofin, woe unto me because of their fists. Shem Kohen Gedolim, all these people are high priests. They're all Kohanim Gedolim. Uvneim Gizbarim, and their children, they made their sons to be the treasurers of the base of Mikdash. V'chasneim Amar Kalin, and their son-in-laws are Amar Kalin. These are people who are basically in charge of the base of Mikdash. V'avdein Chovdanis Amek V'maklos, and the servants beat people with sticks. In other words, there was nepotism, and these Kohanim Gedolim would go ahead and use their authority to go ahead and take a lot more than belonged to them. And they had these hoodlums who were hooligans who were basically working for them, and their family was working for them. And in doing so, they just amassed wealth and they just amassed power. And this is a terrible, terrible thing. Okay, so Tanar Banu, we have a brisa about one of these people. Azara, the temple courtyard, cried out 4 cries. This is probably the simple way to understand this is that this is, some understand there's actually a possible, but others understand this is like a figure of speech. That Rishon, the first thing the base of Mikdash cried out was, the temple courtyard cried out was, Tumikan b'nei Eli, the children of Eli, get out of here. Shimu heichal Hashem, because they contaminated the sanctuary of Hashem. The different opinions in terms of what they did. The simple read of the Chumash in Shmuel is that they went ahead and they committed adultery. Others understand that the women who were coming to the base of Mikdash to bring offerings for being a yoledes, for being someone who gives birth, you have to bring bird offerings. And bird offerings, if you have like a bunch of people lining up, and there's the women who just gave birth and have their bird offerings, which are going to help them become tahar, and there's another person who's bringing a chatas with a bull, so you're the Kohen, you get to have the meat. Which one do you want? Yeah, you go for the cow. And that's what they were doing. Okay, so that's bad enough. But also what happens is these women, they were delayed coming back to their homes, and because now they've been impure for all the time since they gave birth, and until they bring this carbon, they are impure, so they're delayed from coming to their homes. Therefore, it's as if they committed adultery by preventing them from being their own husbands. Okay, one way or another, what they did was bad, and therefore the court of the base of Mikdash cried out, get out of here. The court also cried out, depart from here, Yisachar, a man of the village of Barkai, he honors himself, he desecrates the sacred offerings of heaven. What does that mean? He would wrap his hand with silk and perform the avoda. Okay, that's not allowed to be done. You have to touch everything, the base of Mikdash, the Kohanim have to touch things directly, but this person was too grand to be able to touch things directly, so he made himself like a glove out of silk, protected him, and in doing so, he denigrated the base of Mikdash, where you can't touch him, you can't touch holy things. Okay, we'll see what happens to him tomorrow. The court also cried out here 2 good things. Raise up your head, O gates, right? The pasuk from Tehillim, and the pasuk, and over here they continue. Yishmael ben Piachi, Talmidish ben Pinchas. That Yishmael ben Piachi, a disciple of Pinchas, may enter. He's allowed to be a priest, a high priest. He's allowed to be a Kohen Gadol. So even though his children, we mentioned in the brisa before, his children were really bad people, he himself was a good person. The court also cried out, and Vikanis Yochanan ben Narbai, Talmidish ben Pinkai, Yochanan ben Narbai, the disciple of Pinkai, may enter. Vimali Kreisa Mikach Shemaim, and fill his stomach with the sacred offerings of heaven. So what in the world does that mean? You should fill his stomach. So the brisa continues. Amru al Yochanan ben Narbai, they said about Yochanan ben Narbai, this Kohen Gadol, She'ochal Shlosh Me'es Hagam, he eats 300 calves. Shosa Shlosh Me'es Garba, you need to drink 300 kegs of wine for dinner. V'ochal Arba Ba'im Sa'a Gozlos Bikinuach Sudan, he eat 40 sa of young birds for dessert. Quite the meal. Amru, they said about him, Kol Yamav Shel Yochanan Lo Ben Arbai Lo Nimtza Nozer Mikdash. There was no leftovers found in the base of Mikdash. So what does this mean? This sounds like a terrible thing, but actually it's a beautiful thing. The Kohen Gadol would get a lot of karbanos coming his way, so he would get a lot of the offerings and the meats and this and that. And what could happen is that they could be very powerful. They could have all these things, and they become very wealthy and all that. He did not do that. He did not use it to amass his own benefits. Rather, how did he eat 300 calves? How did he eat 300 kegs of wine? He would invite all the Kohanim. Every Kohen who wanted could have a meal. Imagine, open door policy. All Kohanim, every day they want a meal, he would open his door and feed them. And the Mefarshim actually explained that during his lifetime, many Kohanim actually moved to Yerushalayim because they knew they had like a soup kitchen all the time. Kohanim, again, many of them, they did not work. They worked in the Beis Hamikdash only a couple times a year, and they had a maestros they depended on. But because of Yochanan ben Narbai, he had all this food that he would give them. So he didn't eat all this food. He served all this food because and to the other Kohanim, and in doing so supported them, and that's why there's nothing left over. But the point is not because he amassed it for himself, but rather because he shared it. Okay, we're going to pick up tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, and discuss what happened to Yisachar Ish Kfar Bar Kai, this Kohen Gadol, who covered his hand with silk. We'll talk about him, and then we will introduce the next parak, because tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, we'll finish the fourth parak. Have a great day.